He was her first love, but she was never his first choice. That is the kind of love people spend months trying to understand and a lifetime trying to forget. Have you ever wondered why the people who leave the deepest scars are often the ones who never truly stayed? Why the heart keeps a room reserved for someone who never built a home inside it? This is not a story about getting revenge. It is a story about learning the painful difference between a fire that dazzles your eyes and a fire that keeps you warm when the nights become cold. Her name was Callista. His name was Leonidas. And the man who would eventually teach her what love actually felt like was named Nicandros. Their story began on an ordinary spring afternoon that changed everything. Callista believed in impossible love. She believed that if you loved someone enough, deeply enough, selflessly enough, your love would eventually become their home. She was young enough to mistake sacrifice for devotion, and patient enough to confuse waiting with faith. Then, Leonidas walked into her life with dreams larger than the sky and confidence, bright enough to blind anyone standing too close. He spoke about becoming someone the world would remember, and every sentence carried the certainty that greatness was simply waiting for him to arrive. What she didn't notice was that every dream began with I. Every future ended with me. The word we only appeared when he needed something. But first, love rarely notices grammar. It only hears promises. So when Leonidas confessed that he wanted to leave their small town and build a successful design company in Athens, Callista smiled as though he had handed her the future itself. She took extra shifts at the bookstore. She skipped vacations. She sold jewelry that had belonged to her grandmother. Every sacrifice became another brick beneath his feet. She called it love. Months passed. His company began to grow. His phone rang constantly. His emails multiplied. His calendar became crowded. Strangely, the busier Leonidas became, the smaller Callista seemed to become inside his life. He missed birthdays because investors were visiting. He forgot dinners because clients needed him. He canceled weekends because success couldn't wait. Whenever disappointment appeared in her eyes, he kissed her forehead and whispered the same sentence. I'm doing this for us. She believed him because hope has a strange habit of making excuses where truth is trying to speak. Have you ever noticed that the people willing to carry the relationship often mistake exhaustion for commitment? Callista didn't realize she was carrying both their dreams, while Leonidas carried only his own. Another few months slipped away. His business finally exploded. Interviews, awards, magazine covers. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know the brilliant young entrepreneur. Everyone except the woman who had quietly built the road beneath his success. The celebration dinner arrived on a rainy evening. Callista wore the blue dress Leonidas once said was his favorite. She imagined he might finally slow down. Perhaps tonight he would thank her. Perhaps tonight he would say, "We made it." Instead, halfway through dinner, while barely looking up from his phone, he sighed. "I've been thinking. Those 4 words can either build a future or quietly destroy one." He finally looked into her eyes. "I don't think this is the right time for a serious relationship anymore." She waited for him to smile, to laugh, to say he was joking. He never did. Instead, he continued explaining how success demanded freedom, how relationships created limitations, how London was offering him opportunities, how he needed space. Every sentence sounded rehearsed. Not one sentence sounded broken. Only hers did. Months earlier, she had believed she was walking beside him. Now she realized she had only been pushing him forward. She wasn't his partner. She had been his fuel. There is a special kind of silence that arrives when your heart finally understands something your mind has refused to believe. Callista found herself sitting in that silence. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't ask him to stay. For the first time since meeting Leonidas, she saw him clearly. He had always loved ambition more than people, success more than intimacy, the mountain more than the hand reaching beside him. She stood quietly, placed enough money on the table for her meal, looked at him one final time, then walked into the rain without asking him to follow. Some endings don't sound like explosions. Some sound like footsteps fading away forever. The months that followed were not dramatic. Healing almost never is. She cried while washing dishes. She cried during morning walks. She cried while hearing songs that used to belong to both of them. But little by little, her tears stopped asking why. Instead, they began asking what came next. She enrolled in interior design classes. She rented a tiny apartment filled with second-hand furniture. She painted walls bright colors. She planted herbs on the balcony. She learned something extraordinary. Peace is much quieter than passion, but it lasts much longer. One autumn afternoon, several months after rebuilding her life, she met Nicandros. There was no lightning, no fireworks, no dramatic music. He simply smiled when she accidentally dropped her groceries outside a neighborhood cafe and helped gather the oranges rolling across the sidewalk. Sometimes the safest harbors don't announce themselves. They simply remain standing while storms pass. Nicandros remembered everything, not because he tried, because he cared. He remembered she disliked cinnamon in her coffee. He remembered her favorite poet. He remembered the anniversary of her father's passing, when her car refused to start one cold morning. He arrived before she even finished explaining the problem, when she doubted herself before presenting a new design project. He reminded her of every obstacle she had already survived. He never made grand speeches. He simply showed up, again and again and again. Months passed. Callista noticed something unusual. She no longer felt exhausted after loving someone. She felt rested. With Leonidas, she had always wondered whether she mattered. With Nicandros, she never had to wonder. He answered the question every ordinary day, not through promises, through presence. Have you ever realized that consistency is one of love's most beautiful languages? It doesn't shout, it whispers every single day. Callista slowly discovered that being chosen daily feels far richer than being adored occasionally. Yet somewhere inside her heart, Leonidas remained, not as reality, as memory, as a ghost. Certain songs still reminded her of him. Certain streets still echoed with laughter that no longer existed. Some scars don't disappear. They simply become quieter. Then one snowy afternoon, several months after her engagement to Nicandros, the ghost became flesh again. Leonidas returned. He looked exactly as he had promised he would. Elegant suit, luxury watch, expensive car, magazine-famous smile. Success had polished every visible part of him, except his eyes. His eyes looked lonely. He found her standing outside an art gallery. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled. "I've been looking for you." Funny how people search hardest after they've already let go. They walked together through a nearby park. Leonidas confessed that success had given him everything except peace. He had met countless people who admired him. No one loved him the way Callista once had. "I was building a future for us," he whispered. "I'm finally ready now." For one terrifying moment, her heart remembered, not her mind. Her heart, it raced exactly as it had years before. The chemistry remained alive beneath layers of healing. This was the dangerous truth nobody talks about. Sometimes healing doesn't erase desire. It teaches you not to obey it. Leonidas reached for her hand. "I can give you everything now." She almost believed the younger version of herself. Almost. Then she remembered something important. When she had nothing left to give, would he still choose her? She already knew the answer, because once before, he hadn't. She thought about Nicandros waiting at home, probably making dinner, probably wondering whether she preferred rosemary or thyme in the roasted vegetables. Not because he needed credit, because remembering her happiness had become his habit. There stood two different versions of love. One was breathtaking. The other was dependable. One made her pulse race. The other slowed her breathing. One had almost burned her into ashes. The other had patiently rebuilt her from them. Which love survives ordinary Tuesdays? Which love stays after applause disappears? She smiled sadly at Leonidas. There was a time when hearing these words would have changed my entire world. He stepped closer. "So why not now?" She looked toward the setting sun before answering. "Because you're finally ready to choose me." She placed a hand gently over her own heart. "But months ago, I finally chose myself. She paused, and every single day since then, Nicandros has chosen me too. Leonidas lowered his eyes, perhaps for the first time in his life. Success wasn't enough. Callista kissed his cheek gently, not as a lover, as someone saying goodbye to the person she used to be. Then she walked away. The ghost did not disappear, but it stopped leading her. A few weeks later, her wedding day arrived. The air smelled of olive branches and white jasmine. Friends laughed. Music floated through the courtyard. Nicandros stood waiting beneath the ancient stone archway. His smile wasn't dramatic. It was peaceful. As Callista walked toward him, a breeze drifted across the courtyard, carrying a familiar cologne. For one heartbeat, Leonidas flashed across her memory. The laughter, the dreams, the heartbreak, the fire. A small ache settled inside her chest. She didn't fight it. She didn't pretend it wasn't there. Some ghosts deserve acknowledgement, not resurrection. Then Nicandros reached for her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, real. She looked into the eyes of the man who knew her favorite books, her greatest fears, the way she hummed while cooking, and the silence she needed after difficult days. He loved not the version of her that could help him rise. He loved the woman standing before him, exactly as she was. Callista smiled, not because the ghost had vanished, but because she finally understood something that only time can teach. The brightest flames often leave nothing behind, but the quiet hearth, the one tended with patience, kindness, and ordinary faith, can keep two hearts warm for an entire lifetime. And perhaps that is the greatest love story of all, because some loves are meant to haunt you with beautiful memories, and others are meant to welcome you home every single day.